Thank you, Bhante, for inviting me to give the talk. I was just thinking, I've been listening to you for a very long time.
Have you?
Yeah. Like for like, could it be like 20 years almost?
What?
It's a long time. And it's very rare, actually, that a more junior monk will give a talk in front of a senior monk. So it feels a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. But I will persevere because you asked me.
And because you know that no matter what, I would never judge you.
You say that, and I think these people believe you. So yes, but I'm very fortunate, actually, Bhante.
Okay.
Because I've had the opportunity to listen for so long to the Dhamma from you. And I was just reflecting. I can remember listening to you in Sydney many years ago. Then I think I went down to Santi, and we had you gave a talk in the cave there. It was in the old days when the cave was small, and there was like a blanket or something out the front that kind of kept it safe. Do you remember that?
Okay, yeah.
It was all candle lit and mysterious, and
giving talks in the cave was great.
Yeah, it was really special because it's something that really makes you feel like you're doing something spiritual. And then I remember I would go to your talks when they were in North Sydney, when you had your the good life with Bhante Sujato. And I see many of my friends here, actually, who I met there, Deepika and Radha, Alex, Sin, Nicola, Aruni, Janani, so many people that I met there. And I always remember how excited I would be to go on. It was a Friday night, and I would trek from my home, which was in the west, and trek across the bridge to deepest, darkest North Sydney. And it was a really important part of my week going there. And I always sit there, and I always sit really still and really try to listen really hard. And I did that because I got so much out of those talks. It was the first time really that I heard the Dhamma in a really accessible way that meant something to my life. You'd often talk about sila, talk about being good, and those things were not necessarily the messages I was getting from society and or friendship groups and things like that. And so it was something I really paid attention to. And I'd been a Buddhist a long time by the time I started to go to those things, but I had a few kind of wacky kind of Buddhist experiences with various groups.
When did you become a Buddhist?
Early, maybe when I was 20 or 20, yeah. I can't even work out how long ago that was, but feels like a long time. But one of the first things I learnt when I came to the Dhamma was that listening to the Dhamma is special. And I first started out actually kind of getting into the Dhamma with a Tibetan group, and they had this analogy of listening to the Dhamma, which I still think of from time to time. And that is to think of yourself like a pot. And so, like a pot, you can put things in it. You can't put anything in the pot if it's already full. Like if you think you know everything, then you're not going to be able to put new things into the pot. If you are closed-minded and you don't want to listen, it's like an upturned pot. It's like someone who doesn't want to hear what's being said. Or you might...
Ajahn Brahm has a reputation of that. He says that when you have tea, you can always put more sugar into it.
That's true. You can always sweeten it up a little bit, maybe.
The sugar molecules go in between the water.
Yeah, okay.
According to Ajahn Brahm.
Sure, there's a limit to that. Or that if you listen to the Dhamma with like a mind that's full of negativity and looking to fault find, then it's kind of like a pot that's dirty on the inside. And so, of course, the best kind of pot is an empty pot that just kind of takes things in. And so that's a way of listening to the Dhamma. And I think for a long time, listening to the Dhamma was something that was very special for me. It was like a real spiritual experience. And I wonder, I was just thinking, maybe that's changed a little bit. Maybe I've become a little bit habituated to hearing the Dhamma. And I think in this age where there's just so much Dhamma available, maybe our attitude has shifted a little bit to it. You know, in those days, I didn't used to try to find Dhamma on the interwebs. I maybe would listen to a recording at a center or something, but it was a rare thing. You know, I had to go and find someone who was going to talk the Dhamma. And so I wonder if we've become a little bit kind of blasé about hearing the Dhamma and the way we approach hearing the Dhamma. In monk rules, we have some Sekya rules about the way that we should teach Dhamma. And so there's all these rules, you know, that you shouldn't teach Dhamma to someone who has a parasol or who isn't, who is wearing shoes. You should teach Dhamma from a higher seat. And these are all about respect for the Dhamma and things like if you're walking along a road with someone and you're on the kind of ditch side of the road, you shouldn't teach Dhamma in the ditch, you know. And there's all these ways that kind of give these signals of how important the Dhamma is and why we should kind of give it some respect. And there's so many examples in the texts of people, you know, so excited to go and hear the Dhamma from the Buddha and to learn and how transformative it was for them when they heard the Dhamma. So it's slightly weird looking at like how we're doing this here today. This is not how I expected to ever be encountering the Dhamma, you know, with us all online, all in separate places. And I think there's some sadness in my heart because although this is great, it's not the same as entering that cave at Santi, which was candlelit and, you know, cool and mysterious. It doesn't have the same feeling of going on a spiritual journey, does it? You know, here you are in your usual space, you know, in your domestic environment. And I've seen some pretty funny things whilst we've started doing the Zoom thing from looking at you all and looking at other people on my other teachings. And it's not quite the same looking at you in your bathrobes, lying down in your bed, eating your noodles. It's not quite the same experience that, you know, you have when you have a Dharma center. You know, you go into this space of specialness, a space which is kind of, I don't want to use the word loosely, but it's sacred. You know, you go into a space which is a place where you are deliberately moving away from your usual environment and entering into a place where you're more likely to, I suppose, behave a little bit differently and listen a bit differently. Because, you know, we listen all day, you know, but we sit all day. But then when we come to listen to the Dhamma, you know, the container of a spiritual space, the container of going to see a teacher, it has an uplifting effect on the mind. And we enter into that space wanting to have a kind of spiritual experience, wanting to have an opportunity to hear something that's going to transform us a little bit, going to help us. Bhante Sujata was just talking about the beautiful image of the rain cloud, dropping the raindrops on the top of the mountain, which fill the rivulets, which fill the... And this is an image that we find in the sutta called Ignorance, where this is used to talk about that that flow of, you know, a little bit, you know, at the top of a mountain, a little bit of rain drops down, and becomes this raging river, becomes the ocean. And this is how it's nice to think of hearing the Dhamma, like drop by drop, you know, over time. So much conditioning. Ajahn Brahm talks about brainwashing. You know, he says over time, you know, little by little, you kind of become conditioned. You hear the Dhamma and you are slowly transformed by that. I said I've been a Buddhist for 20 years, but listening to you for so long, Bhante, I'm not sure that, I'm sure that I've learned a lot, but I'm not sure that I have a lot to show for it. But when I look back at the kind of person I was and the life I lived and the way I was perceiving the world and myself and nature, it was very different. And I can see that actually I've come a long way in the Dhamma. I hope so, looking at wearing the robes and all that. But, sometimes from day to day, it's hard to see that transformative power of the Dhamma. But once in a while, you kind of, you realize something and you kind of like, and it's a beautiful experience. You see it so clearly and you think, it's that light bulb moment. And so when those things come along, it's really nice. But the Buddha talked about the benefits of listening to the Dhamma. And I'm looking at Alex here because this is one of our favourite suttas. And he said the benefits of listening to the Dhamma. This is in the Anguttara 5s, number 202. And he said there are 5 benefits to listening to the Dhamma. The first benefit is that you hear something that perhaps you haven't heard before. So maybe this is something new to you, but this is what the Dhamma is for. It's something that you hear for the first time and it changes you. And actually this is something you see constantly in the suttas. It's people in the first encounter with the Buddha, when they hear the Dhamma for the first time, they say sadhu, 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 and they give that famous line that gets repeated time and time again, like a lamp in the darkness, or a container that's been uprighted. And this is how I felt, I think, the first time I heard the Dhamma. Otherwise I wouldn't have gotten into it as deeply as I have. There was something when I heard the Dhamma for the first time that just fitted together with my mind somehow. And it's hard to think back all that time and remember, but it mattered and it was meaningful and it was deep and it was profound. And I was like, what? There's this whole other way of looking at the world, this whole other way of being that I just never encountered before. So it's just a precious thing. And so hearing the Dhamma for the first time, we all heard the Dhamma for the first time sometime. I wonder if you can remember when it was. And did it matter? Did it change you somehow? And so this is one benefit of hearing the Dhamma. The second is that you've heard something before and you confirm what you know. So some of you might have heard me talk about this Anguttara Nikaya 5.202 before, and you're slowly remembering, there's these 5 things, yes. And so when you hear something that you've heard before and you remember it, then it's good because it's like, I remember that. And you deepen your knowledge a little bit. You kind of get to confirm your memory of hearing the Dhamma. And for me, this is one of the ways that I really learn the Dhamma is listening to the same things over and over again because it gets in there, It's easy to hear something once and forget about it. But when you hear something many times, it is different each time you hear it. It's the same information, maybe the same sutta, maybe the same story, but you hear it in a different way. And it's kind of like a digging something slightly deeper in your mind. It gets in there, there's that little bit more. And I think the frequency of hearing the Dhamma, I return to the same teachings over and over again, I return to the same passages over and over again, and it does mean something each time. And one of the problems perhaps when we are faced with an endless supply of Dharma talks is this kind of novelty that we seek from the Dhamma. And this is something I feel from time to time, a bit of pressure as a teacher. It's like, I better come up with something new, otherwise they'll kind of switch me off they'll think that I've got nothing new to say, that I've run out of knowledge, that this is it, I've reached the limit. But actually, when I look at the suttas, the Buddha taught the same things over and over and over and over again. And that's a good example to follow, maybe, because that's very helpful for people listening to the Dharma. To hear the same things over and over again is useful. Might be slightly boring. I think there's one story, is it in the Vinaya, of a monk who was required to give the awada to the nuns, and he gave the same one every time, and they'd be like, oh gosh, here comes that monk again, he's going to give the same talk again, he overheard it once. And then so he gave the talk and displayed his psychic powers and kind of went up into the air and kind of span around, and the nuns were like, whoa, okay, like maybe it's worth listening to this monk over and over again if that's the kind of power he has. I'm not going to fly up into the air.
Yes. No? You can't tease us like that.
So this is the second benefit of hearing the Dharma. You get to hear again what you've heard before. You can confirm your knowledge of that. The third is that you remove doubt. So, when you hear the Dharma, you get to put your own version of the Dharma in perspective, which is good. The one way that we remove doubt is to inquire more and more, so that we kind of can dispel delusion and confusion and gain more and more wisdom. And this is really important, because sometimes when we don't know what to do, it's an impediment for our meditation, it's an impediment for our practice, our spiritual practice as a whole. We have questions and we want to answer it. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but Bhante Sujata and I regularly receive correspondence from people, regularly receive questions from people. And Bhante says it's so important, if someone has a question, to answer it, to help them, because doubt is such a problem for many people, not knowing. It's so confusing when you have doubt in your mind. That's all you've got, really. It's like, oh, is it this? Is it that? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And it's all consuming. And so removing this doubt is really important. And so it's good if you can find out some answers yourself, either online or from books, but it's also good to ask a teacher who you trust, so that you can remove that doubt. And that's why it's really good to hear the Dhamma, because it tunes you in to those things that you might be wondering about. And you'll always learn something, and when we learn something, we're removing some of that delusion. So that's the third benefit of listening to the Dhamma. The fourth is that we straighten our view, ujju kaditi. So this is one of my favorite concepts on the path. So just like when we hear that image of the drops falling on top of the mountaintop, the rain falling and filling up the rivers, filling up the streams, this is an image, I guess, of straightening our view. Like over time, very slowly, this conditioning happens, and we start to see more and more in line with the teachings, more and more in line with how things really are, reality. And so when we are straightening our view, we're moving it towards right view. So we're kind of taking our crooked views and we're slowly bending them, getting them slightly straighter. Each time we hear the Dhamma, there's this opportunity for us to straighten our view and come more and more in line with right view. And this is very profound as well, because sometimes I think we have this concept that right view is something you arrive at straight away. That, you just be sitting there one day meditating and suddenly right view comes. And it may be that this is the case, maybe at the top end of the path, you get those very deep insights. But for most of us, I think right view is going to come slowly and incrementally. And the Buddha talked about right view as being like the dawn. The dawn is something you see before the sunrise. So as we gradually straighten our view, we're kind of edging closer and closer to a fuller realization of what the Dharma is. And when I when I read the texts or listen to talks, each time I get this opportunity, and this is why the Buddha talks about how straightening our view is a benefit of listening to the Dhamma. And the fifth benefit is that our mind becomes serene and confident. And this is so true. When you hear something that's in line with reality, when you hear something that speaks truth, you feel, this is right. Kind of faith develops in the teaching. Faith develops in the Buddha's qualities, the Dhamma, and the idea that this is possible, this path. You get faith in the Sangha, the Arya Sangha, that it's possible that this path leads to extinguishment. And so hearing the Dhamma is something that produces this faith within us. And that's very important, very powerful. But that faith is something that's serene, and it's a serene, bright confidence that is, I guess, spiritually nourishing, makes you feel full, the kind of fullness you can't get from other forms of entertainment, listening to music or listening to podcasts or whatever. And so when we come to something like this, we have all these opportunities to hear the Dhamma, and our mind should also kind of be aware of these opportunities, not just sit there hoping that time will pass and the talk will be over, or sit there using it as a kind of spiritual entertainment, but using it purposefully, using it intentionally as an opportunity. And the Buddha talked about the Dhamma as being an opportunity for escape. He said that in another Anguttara Nikaya 5s, that there are these 5 opportunities to escape for freedom. And the first is when you're listening to the Dhamma, when you're listening to a Dhamma talk. This is an opportunity for freedom. Maybe not from one of my talks, but you get a good teacher like the Buddha or Saparissa, maybe Bhante Akaliko, and you hear the Dhamma and it makes sense. And this is an opportunity for freedom. So many examples in the suttas of people hearing just a few lines of Dhamma, and their good qualities, past karma perhaps, and this powerful connection with their teacher and the Dhamma, allow them to become free. And so this is the first in this list of 5 things that the Buddha said are opportunities for freedom. The second is teaching the Dhamma. And this is something that I've only, of course, realized, not that I've escaped, but I've only realized since I've been teaching the Dhamma how powerful it is to actually speak the Dhamma. You really have to know a little bit, and when you talk this Dhamma, it kind of comes alive in you even more, kind of sparkles in your mind, and you see it somehow more clearly. There's, I don't want to say mastery, but there's a kind of sense of you've synthesized a little bit of this stuff that you've heard. It's mixed around inside you, and then it comes out and it makes sense. And there's a joy that comes from realizing, I've understood something a little bit, tiny bit, and that I'm helping other people perhaps make sense of it as well. And so I can see why the Buddha said that this is an opportunity for freedom, because when you're speaking the Dhamma, it's alive in you. And it's like you're not really there at all. It's just the Dhamma. It's the Dhamma that has been passed down so many generations from the time of the Buddha, from the Buddha himself. And it doesn't matter who was speaking it, doesn't matter if they taught it under a tree or in a cave or on Zoom, but this is the same Dhamma, and it's alive, and it's transmitting through you to these other people and keeping the Dhamma alive. So this is another opportunity for escape, teaching the Dhamma. Another opportunity is reciting the Dhamma. And this is like, when you memorize it and you do some chanting, it's good to know what the chanting means, of course, so that you can get the benefits of the meaning of the words. And this is something I often get a rush of piti, a rush of pleasant feelings in the body, this kind of thrill and exaltation in the mind when I do chanting, because again, it's that idea that the Dhamma is alive in you. So you're speaking the Dhamma, you're part of this bigger spiritual community, this bigger practice, this bigger picture. And so it's really nice to chant the Dhamma, or even just memorizing some phrases, memorizing even just a few words. Can be really beautiful as well, because you're actively engaged with the Dhamma. It's quite different to that passive state of listening, quite different to the active state of teaching. But when you're kind of just reciting the Dhamma, you're in it, and there's all these opportunities for it to just flicker through the mind and get deeper down into the brain and make more sense. And so this is a useful opportunity. And these words of the Dhamma will come up in your mind when you need them. And it's very precious to know that you've got it, you've got it in you. And that's another opportunity. The fourth opportunity for escape is the pondering that you do. So you've heard the Dhamma, maybe you've learnt it, and then you really think about it, you reflect on it. And this is the patisankha bala. This is when this is the power of reflection that we have, when we're able to really think deeply about what it is we've heard. And I think, unfortunately, because of the preponderance of Dhamma talks everywhere, we don't really take the opportunity for this aspect of the practice. We hear a Dhamma talk, and the Dhamma talk is over, we get up, we have a chat. The Dhamma talk online, you turn it off and you go back into your life, and you kind of don't allow for that space for absorbing and thinking about what you've heard. And so that's a bit sad. We don't take this opportunity to learn and synthesize, really understand and make it meaningful to us. Because as Bhante Sujata has often said, that there's no wisdom in the suttas, there's no, this doesn't mean anything, they're just words that are spoken, they're just sounds, or they're just letters on a page. It doesn't mean anything until it means something to you. There has to be something that matters to you. There has to be something that you do to understand the Dhamma. Otherwise, it's just wasted. It's like scattering the water outside the pot. It doesn't get in there. You've emptied it yourself. And the Patisankha bala appears so much throughout the suttas. And this is something I didn't really understand until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that the Buddha encouraged us to reflect. So much of the way meditation is taught, the way Dhamma is taught is, we kind of skip over this stage. We kind of hear the meditation instructions and get straight into the meditation. We don't really have this framework for pondering and reflecting. We're not encouraged to do that in a lot of meditation centers or schools or retreats, things like that. And we're kind of told thinking is bad and you shouldn't think. Like thinking's just thinking, just gets in the way. But that was not how the Buddha taught the Dhamma. He encouraged us to ponder and to really reflect upon the Dhamma so that we understand it better. And you see this, of course, in practices like Chāganusati, Sīlanusati, where the meditator is encouraged to reflect upon their good actions, their generosity. And this is powerful because when you start to reflect, you start to put together the pieces of the puzzle. You start to see, oh, the Buddha advised generosity. Why would he advise generosity? Oh, because when you're generous, you're doing something good, benefits you, benefits others. Then when it comes to reflect upon it, joy appears in the mind. And this joy is so beautiful and so powerful and can take you so deep into meditation. And so when you're reflecting upon your generosity, recollecting it, then you have this opportunity to understand why the Buddha praised generosity. And it's powerful to reflect in this way. You start to put together little bits and pieces of wisdom that matter to you. And once you've understood it, it's really amazing because you see, oh, that's why the Buddha taught in this way. You understand it. And this reflecting is something that I think that we should do more of. When the Buddha taught, he'd just give a few lines of Dhamma, teach the Dhamma in brief, and people would go with those few words. They had to remember it, they had to really take it in, and they would sit and they'd try to work out what the Buddha was talking about. They wouldn't just, sit and go straight for jhana. They would try to think, why is this important? How does this affect me? How does it affect my life? How does it affect others? And they would take it in and really think about it. And I received a message from someone today who talked about how he was so overwhelmed with some generosity that someone did for him recently, and he was trying to write a letter that kind of conveyed his thanks. And he was thinking about all of these wonderful benefits that come from giving, these beautiful mind states that arise from giving. He was thinking about it, and he was so moved to tears from thinking about the Dhamma. And this is something that's happened to me over and over and over again. When you reflect upon the Dhamma and you ponder it deeply, it affects you so much. And I'm so grateful for that wisdom. And I'm so moved that I've learnt this stuff that is so powerful and so meaningful, and that has transformed my life. And so when you ponder the Dhamma in this way, it really goes deep into your heart, and the heart just becomes so freed and so open, and you feel like you're the luckiest person in the world to hear this tiny little bit of Dhamma that mattered so deeply. And so this is a beautiful part of the practice that I encourage us to do as much as we can. It's good to think about the stuff, like, just take a small chunk. You don't have to read the whole Digha Nikaya in one sitting, but just a small chunk, something that matters to you, something that you want to think about, and take the time to ponder it. And this is something that, I have the luxury of doing as a monk. I have the time to ponder, and this is very fortunate. And I know that there's a lot of time pressures on other people, but sometimes even, the way it works with the anussatis is a good opportunity at the start of your practice to do some pondering, to have a theme that you just think about a little bit. And this is a good creative way to work with the mind that is usually quite busy anyway. You get to be sitting there for the first few minutes at least of your meditation. All that stuff that you've been doing in your days get to be coming into your practice. All those worries, all those doubts, all those problems and concerns are going to be popping into the mind anyway. So why not at the beginning of your practice do a little bit of directed reflection? And I think this is why we, at the beginning of so many of our practices in Buddhism, we start with the three anussitis of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And this is something that inspires the mind. We might just end up using it as a kind of formula, a ritual, a thing to do. But when you actually, we're doing these 5 things the Buddha taught, we're doing these things of actually, listening to the Dhamma, chanting reciting the Dhamma, and we're we're able to reflect upon it at the same time. And so when we do this, we're actually, it's an opportunity for us. So yeah, pondering. Pondering is something I like doing with the Dhamma. And it helps me feel like I've got this connection to the practice and the texts and the Buddha. And then the last opportunity for freedom is when you take something from the Dhamma and use it as a samadhi subject. I almost said object. I've got in trouble. And so when you take it so I've been listening to you, Bhante, I do listen. And so when you take this as a samadhi subject, then this is an opportunity for escape. And this is because these things are so profound and so deep and so powerful. And even something like just the word love, to bring love into your meditation as one of the Brahma-viharas, to ponder it deeply, to feel love arise in your heart, and to understand what it means to have a mind full of love and what it means to have a mind without love, and to use this as perhaps a basis for your practice and get deeper and deeper and deeper. And these are opportunities, these lead further and further and further on the path, or something like impermanence or not self or suffering, whatever it is that you want to explore in your practice. Just one word is enough here, one concept is enough to take you very deep into meditation and perhaps even get you through the other side into the realm of the deathless, the extinguishment, gone forever, perhaps. And this is what the Buddha meant when he spoke about escape. And so I don't know how long I've been talking, probably long enough. So these are the 5 benefits of listening to the Dhamma. 5 benefits are that you hear something you've never heard before. You hear something that you've heard before again, which is good. You remove doubt. You straighten your view, and the mind becomes serene. And the 5 opportunities for freedom: hearing the Dhamma, teaching the Dhamma, reciting the Dhamma, pondering the Dhamma, and using the Dhamma as a samadhi subject. So this is something that I've learnt from listening to the Dhamma. And Bhante, I'm always so grateful to you for teaching me the Dhamma and for talking the Dhamma so often. I hope that our friends here realize how fortunate we are, because Bhante, I think this weekend you've got like 3 more talks.
I don't know, yeah.
Last weekend you did like 6 or 7 talks. It's like you're always teaching, and we're so lucky. So I hope that we never become complacent or blasé, and that I'm speaking to myself here mostly. I always listen to Bhante's teachings. He said that the other day I was listening and I came and said, "Oh, that was a good talk, Bhante." And he's like, "Oh, you listened?" And I was like, "I always listen to you. I didn't become your student to ignore your talks." And so, yeah, this is my talk about listening to the Dhamma, and I hope it may be of some benefit to you.
Thanks so much, Venerable. Beautiful.